I will be there virtually. So I've got a really busy month of June. So and I'll be on vacation next week. So I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm trying to get done this week. So traveling to LA for a day was not in the cards.
The good thing for me, I'm in LA, so it's like a 30-minute drive. Might as well pop over.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Well, I would have had to deal with O'Hare, so I would just rather avoid that if possible.
I think we have somebody going from our product to I don't know, sort of represent runtime SBOM.
Yeah, right on. Okay.
Well, I'll keep a lookout for.
All right. So let's see, attestations. So last time we were going through the SSDF, we are trying to map like an SSDF thing, and where did we leave off? I think you were kind of in and out of that meeting, Jeff, if I remember right. Or was that Derek, maybe?
I think I was
last
here
weekend. Yeah, last week I wasn't actually here at all. I was sick, so I'm not sure where we left off.
I was dealing with a major DNS outage, so I was not really engaged.
Yeah,
It's never DNS.
Sorry, the future of security on the internet was held up because of DNS.
Yeah.
Ironic.
Okay, so let's see. I think we ended up with we were talking about signatures, and we were having some debate about signing, and we were talking about signing for integrity purposes versus signing for a signatory type purpose, which are in two entirely different types of signatures. One of the suggestions that I threw out was to be able to support not only a digital signature, but actually a paper signature, right? I'm the CEO. I'm going to sign off on this thing. Here is my signature. Because otherwise you require PKI and a bunch of other stuff to kind of make this work. And quite honestly, that's what the NIST attestation form is anyway. It is a manual signature.
So I mean, it's interesting that there are different kinds of signatures here, right? Like there's an attestation signature, which you'd expect the CEO to do. There's an integrity signature that you would expect the automated tools to do. There's probably a few others, like there's like an auditor signature, like whether it's not a pass or fail. Like I'm not saying that we did everything. I'm saying that the results here represent the truth as I know it at that time.
Right.
And maybe that's the same as the CEO signature, actually, because I don't think they're required to do everything in SSDF. They're required to attest to what they did and what they didn't do, right?
Right.
So are you saying then that there's basically like a claim signature? So there's a signature for each of the claims. That's the one that's ostensibly auto-generated by the tooling, because those are usually the things that are making the claims. And then for the attestation itself, for each of those attestations that we have, there would be a signature for those as well.
Yeah.
And I think
but that's more like I want to say that that's I'd love to make it clear in this thing that it's not just marked signature, right? That there's like an integrity signature or a vouch signature or something, something that says what that signature represents. That's my thought on this. And I think we were arguing about whether we should sign, like whether you would attest to each claim or the whole document at once or some chunk of it. And that gets complicated.
Yeah, I mean, you like for an attestation, if you are an individual assessor, I mean, as an individual assessor, I might be assessing to this particular attestation versus maybe one of somebody else on my team that might be also an assessor, and they would sign for that attestation that they're looking at. So I think that use case is covered.
But how would we validate that though? So if we're signing the attestation here, right? we have just bomb refs out to other refs. There's no cryptographic validity at all of those other refs that are included in here for this signature. Is that okay?
Right.
Is that the intent? Because at that point, we're talking about signing the whole document.
Right, which is what we were looking at down here, actually. So one of the things that we were talking about was using these ones within these things here as more of integrity signatures, because as you mentioned, you can just easily modify this stuff, right? Not this particular thing, but the ref itself, right? Maybe down here. This is what I can modify. The signature is still valid, but I can modify it down here, right? So we were talking a little bit about having these as more of integrity signatures versus having something at more of the this is at the declarations level. So at the declarations level, where you have the standards, where you have everything else, you would have another we're calling it an affirmation. And this is basically a signature of, I attest to everything being true in this document, whatever is in that document, whether
Right.
it's the claims, whether it's the evidence, whether it's the attestations, doesn't matter.
And then the signature at the bottom, that's an integrity seal on the entire document, right? So
Yes.
so we're not worried about people modifying stuff. Once it's signed here by the tool that generated it, it's all locked in. You can't change anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I'm not sure of is if the affirmation should be in the section where it is, or if it should be another thing up at the top level. It's the only thing I'm not sure about.
Where at?
So the affirmation there,
attestation.
185, you said that that's at the same, is that at the same level as the claims and all of those other top level things? Like it's the same as a declaration, or is it at?
Yep. At the same level. So whatever is in the declaration is basically what you're assigning. And then this is the integrity signature.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay, I wasn't sure if it was there or if it was the next level down or something. That's this collapsed view helps a lot with that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Can you scroll up just a little bit? So that's the affirmation, or that's just the metadata. Okay, I got it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So this is the declarations.
Signing
This is
everything.
kind of the attestation standard that we're working with. That's the higher level object here.
But at this level, how do we actually do a signature for all of the other stuff in here? Like, shouldn't this be at the same level as declaration? So like one more to the left, because we're trying to get all of the declarations together and say that, yes, we're affirming that this is the case. Otherwise,
Sure,
don't we have the same referential integrity problem? Like there's no value to the signature other than the fact that we're capturing it. So that's not true. There is value, right? We're capturing that the signature exists and that we're affirming to something. But since there's no integrity check or anything like that, for all of the other pieces, anybody could change anything in claims or in evidence, and the affirmation as a whole wouldn't matter. Does that make sense? So that's part of the reason that the envelopes are used in Toto, right, is so that anything inside the envelope, when you sign that envelope, if you change anything inside it, it breaks the integrity check, right? And so you know that there was somebody messing around. With the layout that we have here, I don't see that as a possibility. So what we're just capturing the fact that yes, somebody affirmed that this is accurate, but we don't know what the this actually is, because that could arguably change at any point in time.
So if we had,
I'm not saying that we need to do that. I'm just pointing out that like the way that it is right now, The signature is literally just capturing this affirmation. It's not, there is no referential integrity at all in it. If that's what we want, that's totally fine. And maybe we should have another envelope used somewhere to do the other part of it. I don't know, but I do think that this is something we need to talk about.
So if we had a signature here, this would mean that everything else in here could not change.
Why wouldn't it cover the whole document, like the declaration of what is being declared about at the top as well?
Yeah, that's what we have. So this is the root level signature right here, which is already part of the spec.
So are you asking what should the affirmations be at that level as well?
Yeah,
Well, that
'cause
was one of his suggestions. Yeah.
Yeah, we're supporting multiple standards. So like within the declarations, we're supporting multiple standards, multiple attestations, but only one affirmation, right? So if we want to be able to attest to multiple standards and sign off on multiple standards, then we need a different structure than what we have here, I think.
Would that just ultimately be different attestation SBOMs? I understand that it supports it, but
we had been talking about trying to put it all into one.
there'd be no way to
I think
merge
the
them.
logic there was it's going to be a lot of the same evidence and a lot of the same almost claims, right? It's going to be pretty similar between standards. So this way is a lot more efficient.
Yeah, I almost feel like within the attestations themselves, which is where we're capturing, I thought that was where we were capturing the mapping of claims to the standards and all of that, right? We would probably want to sign off an affirmation for each of those. So almost like have the attestation be an envelope and sign that envelope saying that this combination of things is what we're agreeing to. But then the problem is that claims are outside of that scope, right? So it's kind of like the nesting doesn't work if we're trying to do the cryptographic validation from that perspective.
Which is why they're, up a level, right? So they're not in the attestations.
Okay, so then basically this is all just one point in time snapshot with the affirmations for that at the time, and then you sign it once and you're done. You can't add an affirmation, you can't add anything else to it. Then you're basically generating a whole new one when you add something else in there and you have to re-sign it every time. And that's what we want.
What if we could create a signature that says, it combines a few of these things. It says, like, I'm this assessor making, checking this set of claims and attestations and evidence. Like you list like, hey, I'm signing this subset of this stuff.
Yeah, it can't be just the claim like we have it here, right? So like that's what we tried to do with attestations, but we weren't thinking that we would be enforcing cryptographic validity, right? That was not something that we were thinking at the time. In fact, I think we explicitly said we didn't want to do that. But if we had like the claim and the checksum, that would work. Like the checksum of the claim itself, for example.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so just grab something that says, right, I signed this version of this claim, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Steve, is there precedence for that anywhere else in CycloneDX spec? Not aware of any.
Not to my
I'd
knowledge.
say it's not a bad idea.
Not to my knowledge.
I guess my vote would be to do something simpler in the first version of this and maybe worry about cryptographic integrity of claims and whatnot in a later version. Like that seems like a logical enhancement to make down the road after we've got some miles on this thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we already support JSF, so which requires JSON canonicalization, and it omits the signature obviously, but then it signs the rest of it. So we have that level of integrity of signing today, and then of course XML signature as well.
Yeah, so it's just going to be a point in time thing then for the whole document. That's all. I think that's totally fine. I just wanted to make sure we were talking about it. That's all.
Yeah, and I honestly I think that's okay. Um, I'm trying to envision use cases here, and quite honestly, you know, in terms of use cases, I can see these attestation documents being pretty much per standard. So like if I want to test SSDF or if I want to test to ASVS or whatever it is, I'm for the most part going to have only one standard in there. Now, the system that actually generates this, like there's actually a blog post going up for my employer, I think later this month. We actually developed a BSIM app, and it allows us to track all different versions of BSIM, all the different behaviors in each version of BSIM. It allows us to track all of the individual assessments that we are doing, collect all of the evidence, right? Well, it doesn't have to be just a BSIM app, right? This could be applicable to all kinds of things. And changing BSIM to SSDF or something else, the evidence is the same. So a system is eventually going to be able to generate this. And yeah, we're going to be using the same evidence, but from a real world use case perspective, it's probably going to be tied to a single standard anyway, would be my guess.
I'm just nervous that if I'm wearing like a CEO, CTO hat, if I'm trying to affirm something, I worry that I'm affirming to this entire document and not just the individual pieces of it. Because like claims and evidence could change over time, but my signature could be a point in time thing that, yes, I'm certifying to this. It could be pulled and used. I guess that's also part of the system design of it. You'd want to make sure the system doesn't let you reuse a CEO's affirmation or something like that. But that's the one part here that I feel a little bit, something about that bugs me, and maybe that's just from my context. That's the one thing that's I'm tripping up on a little bit here. I think that if we're using this for like one attestation at a time, or one standard at a time, I should say, I think that would probably be fine. But if we're going to be supporting multiple standards in one document, I'd be worried about reuse of certain things in there when maybe we shouldn't be reusing them. But again, maybe that's a function of the system that's generating these rather than the spec itself. I also overthink things a lot, so it's a blessing and a curse.
it has helped with our design, so thank you.
I think this is a good first iteration. Like we can always get feedback on it, see what people think about it, and what else needs to happen. It's just this is one area I'd keep an eye on. Like how often does this thing actually get used as part of it? And yeah,
Got it. And when we were thinking about delegation, we were thinking about the SSDF, the ability for the CEO to delegate, for example, the signing on behalf of that CEO, correct? Is that the use case we were thinking about, Jeff?
Yeah. But as I'm thinking about it, I mean, I know I'll get the identity of the signer from the signature, but it might be helpful to make that explicit here.
Yeah.
So that I could say, hey, I'm Jeff Williams, I'm the CTO of Contrast Security, and here's my digital signature for this with my PGP key or whatever.
Is the goal of that just to capture that it's on behalf of the CEO or on behalf of the organization as a whole?
Right. So you get to say your name and your role, and then sign as that person.
Right. Well, why wouldn't we just capture then like the signer on behalf of the organization or on behalf of the target or on behalf of, the CEO is not always going to be delegated out like that. It's just maybe it's not in their job description. Maybe this is actually a separate role according to the charter of the organization as a whole. So maybe delegation isn't the right concept, but on behalf of would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because ultimately,
So,
like you as CTO would accept on behalf of the organization, or you to test on behalf of the organization, right?
Yeah, and it's up to you to have authority to do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just, in the SSDF, they specifically have this concept of like the CEO has to sign, or their delegate or their designee, I think is the word they use.
okay.
Yeah, so we could capture that as like, I certify this, it's your signature, and then it's on behalf of the CEO. And on behalf of the organization, maybe we support that as multiple targets. I think that would cover more use cases potentially.
Something like that. And then you'd have a contact with a role.
Maybe we just have another target from like 164, because that was there. We supported organizations, individuals, and everything else in there. Or would you want this to be separate and unique? I could actually see a case for it being separate and unique as well.
Yeah. I actually feel like, if it was just, always on behalf of the organization, it's probably sufficient for even SSDF. I don't even think other standards have that concept exactly. So like, you're just signing on behalf of the organization. But I think it would be useful to have their role there.
And should we support multiple affirmations? Are there instances where there would be multiple people signing this?
I wouldn't, because if in that scenario, would they be signing different parts of the document, and then we get back to the envelope problem? Or would you rather just have a individual signing?
Yeah, I'm throwing that out as a question.
I was just thinking from an internal workflow, I could imagine like, the CEO wouldn't sign it unless their CISO had also signed it. And the CISO might not sign it unless, their internal folks, the technical people had actually signed it.
So do
Well,
we
that's
want
also
a
why we're capturing this.
signatories? Do we want a signatories section?
Well, that's why we're capturing the signatures for each of the objects, though, right? Like that does provide that audit trail, and it should provide that degree of comfort that yes, this was actually signed. All of these pieces were done by their appropriate roles. So at this higher level, would we need to support multiple signatures or just the one?
I think having a list of signatories makes sense. It's flexible, and these are, this is different from the individual signatures on claims. This is, for the whole document.
So something like this, Jeff. Oops.
Yeah. And it's like name, role, and signature.
Right. You're right. Let's just do it. Okay. So you could have a bunch of signatories. And then would
Get rid
the
of that.
on behalf of, would that be part of a signatory, or would that just disappear?
I just kill it.
That might, yeah. Because here
I
we're
think there was
capturing
multiple use
important-
cases we're talking about here. There was the one that I think Steve mentioned at the beginning, which was you got a CEO who's going to sign a PDF and then delegate the actual signing of the document to someone else.
Right.
And then I think there's the use case Jeff is talking about. Is that first use case still covered? Maybe. They are just that
They're
signatory.
the only one that gets the CEO is Lee Iacocca, role CEO, and he signed for all Chrysler vehicles from 1985. I don't know.
Yay.
Okay.
And so that means all these other signatures are just integrity seals, right? I think I get rid of that one below the signatories. That goes away,
I think you
right?
need, yeah, but you need the overall one though, at 202.
Yep,
Well, I need it for the affirmations themselves, right?
Whatever system's capturing that, yeah.
So that's the integrity.
Yeah, I think this removal of that external rep though, then how do you include that PDF signature?
That's a fair point. So yeah, that is going to be right.
Would those be maybe for individual signatories?
Yeah, actually you
It would have to be
would.
signatories, not this one, right? Yeah, that's
So this would be like this, and then it would be like that.
right. So this says each affirmation is signed, right? And each affirmation is signed, each declaration is signed, and then the whole thing is signed.
Yep.
Yeah, and then I think we just have the envelope problem that Derek mentioned, which is, that's great. If you have a signature that's only on name and role, ultimately, what are you still signing? What is the envelope that you're signing?
Right.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's up to like the application that's kind of orchestrating all of this to put that forward. And then when that application signs the entire thing, that's that point in time snapshot. Right. So that's kind of our envelope for right now.
I mean, that seems like a pretty big hole that we'd want to address before we proceed much farther.
Yeah, I think we can push that to a future version. And just, we should be explicit about it. If we release this, is just say, hey, we know it's hard. So we pushed it.
All right. Well, I mean, that wasn't the primary purpose anyway, but it is important.
I don't know how people normally do that. Is there like some kind of fingerprint that you calculate of the things that you're signing, like the elements that you're signing?
Yeah, you'd have to have some kind of a fingerprint for the individual pieces and kind of link to them, or you just do it in an envelope where the things that you're signing are inside the envelope and then you sign the whole envelope, because that's
Right.
you checksum all the contents of the envelope at that point.
Right.
And that's the way that that's the way that InToto does its things. The noun's escaping me right now, but the actual pieces that InToto has, they're basically all just a lightweight envelope, and then you can define the object inside it however you want.
I mean, I like the fact that as a company, I'm not going to have to create a zillion copies of this evidence and repeat it everywhere and sign it everywhere. Like that's going to be a pain. I just want to, this way I can generate a document with all of my evidence, give it a bomb ref, and then I can reuse that evidence to support a whole bunch of different standards. That's super.
Yeah, that's where like an interesting idea might be. Could we, so it was the predicate is the noun that I was thinking of, but like if we had each claim or each piece of evidence basically function as a predicate where you have the bomb ref, and then that's like the reference to the actual envelope itself. And then the whole thing is an envelope and everything in there has that signature. But then how would you refer to it outside of that scope? You'd still need to, you'd need to reference the bomb ref and the signature every single time is what you'd need to do for that.
Yeah. Or something, you can make something shorter than a signature, like it could be just a hash of the content of the evidence, or but yeah, you'd have to include it in what you signed.
Sorry, I'm in two worlds right now. Unfortunately, it looks like Amazon's having some issues, and most of my stuff runs in Amazon.
I thought you meant maybe Trump was getting arrested.
Yeah, I saw something with Amazon today. They announced something with S3 and Cyclone and SPDX support, something or to that effect. I know, like Amazon they just created a property taxonomy within the last couple of weeks.
Cool.
Yeah. Maybe everybody's trying out CycloneDX on S3. I don't know.
More likely they're building open API models.
Yes. Okay.
I like it.
I like it too. It's not perfect, but you know what? Considering that there isn't a standard now that does any of this, this is going to be huge. And I think it's good enough for most use cases.
Yeah, I'd love to start a kind of a repo of CycloneDX versions of different requirements documents. I
Yeah.
wonder if we could talk to the members of the OWASP. What's that requirements thing that they do with all the interlinked requirements?
Oh,
You know
yeah,
what I
the
mean?
CRE. Yeah.
CRE. But
Yeah.
it seems to me like they could dump out this pretty quickly.
Probably. Although,
Do
you know, it's interesting because CRE, what they do is they don't actually map like one thing to another standard. What they actually do is they kind of decompose whatever that standard says into its essence, and then that's what they actually map on.
Hmm. I thought they had the actual text in there. I could be wrong.
Well, they do. They have the actual text, but they actually map to these intermediary subjects, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's the subjects which they actually map on.
I don't care about all that crap. I just want to model the requirements documents.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get them in usually in an Excel file or something, but just seems easier to, if you had
Yeah.
a database of all that stuff, to just zap these things out.
I think would be some good messaging, Jeff, would be to maybe between you and I, because we're both OWASP folks, maybe we hit up the ASVS, MSVS, those types of channels in Slack,
Yeah.
and or you know, file issues on GitHub or whatever, and just see if they will do it. Because quite honestly, it's not going to be a lot of work for them to do it.
Right. So what's the schedule?
Would-
Like, at what point do we say, this is good enough? We're going to publish it as version 0.9 or whatever we do. You've done this a million times. I'm just curious how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is there a period when we would do like requests for comments and get feedback on this before we like stamped it, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so within CycloneDX, what we do is we have for every new feature of the standard, we actually have an independent RFC period, which is 4 weeks, and then we have it's usually a 24-hour vote after that. Now you can vote within that 4 weeks, but then there's an official vote call, and anyone in the community is allowed to do it, right? You don't have to be an OWASP member. It's a community-driven project, and we do it all by lazy consensus because that's how most meritocracies work. And as a result, unless we're really doing something horrible, most things actually make it through. This would probably end up being the same way, although in this particular case, what I think we might want to do is extend that RFC period out a bit. So our standardization process does allow for iterations of that 4-week RFC period.
And at what, I'd love to reach out to NIST. I've got a bunch of pretty high level folks over there that I could reach out to. Like I'd start with Ron Ross, probably, who owned for a long time 853 and a bunch of other stuff. And I'd like to bring him in the circle because
Sure.
he could be very helpful in promoting this for us.
Yeah.
But I just want to know the right time. Like it's fine anytime.
Yeah, so in terms of like CycloneDX, like 1.5, we are feature complete at this point, so nothing else can kind of go in there. So in terms of 1.6, we're actually going to be starting 1.6 development like next month. We're working with IBM research in Zurich to bring cryptography bill of materials to the standard. They've already actually built it. So it's just a matter of spinning up a working group, figuring out how we're going to upstream a lot of this content that they've already did the preliminary research on. But this is something that we could potentially put in 1.6. We could also potentially make this an independent attestation standard independent of the CycloneDX BOM format itself. Now, there's pros and cons of doing it either way, right? I like having an all-in-one thing.
Right.
Because it greatly simplifies the tool chain, which is why the value of, XBOM, which is hardware, software, SaaS, along with VDR and VEX in a single tool chain is just makes organizations very efficient. Same thing could be done here. However, for the organizations, maybe they're in the SPDX camp. I don't know. But what would they do in order to adopt this particular standard? Maybe you don't want to adopt the bill of materials format because maybe you don't need it because you are not even producing software. Maybe you are producing some kind of widget and you need to attest to something. Are you going to adopt CycloneDX to do that, or are you going to adopt a purpose-built thing? But it does introduce complexity in terms of the tool chain because the tools would have to support both. Which means a lot more work on the maintainers, but it could potentially invite more people to the party.
And what we had talked about earlier was that this particular part of the spec could easily be wrapped in an in toto attestation, for example. Was something we had talked about was releasing this as a predicate for in toto. So this section of it could be that.
I thought it was just the opposite. I thought the in toto stuff could be evidence within here.
We had talked about both.
Okay.
So yeah, in toto could be evidence within here for sure, but then the entire thing could just be a predicate in toto as well.
Yeah.
And so that might
so the
help
tool would
fix
say
that.
basically like I meet 853 and here's my whole
document.
Attestation document that supports that.
Yeah.
Right. So either way, whether we do it in the bill of materials format or we make an independent one or we do both, I think as a group we have to probably decide what I think is going to be best for the attestation, the adoption of the attestation stuff, as well as not only the adoption in terms of people actually using it, but as adopters, how are we more efficiently going to do it in our own organizations?
Is there a way of doing both at once where it's both an external standard and there's a simple way to include it in a CycloneDX SBOM?
Sure. And what will, this is how CycloneDX got its name, by the way, because circular dependencies. So we could create a dedicated schema just for this. And we already have precedent in the CycloneDX standard to do this. For example, CycloneDX has strict validation on SPDX license IDs. And that SPDX license list is an external schema that we version, but it's versioned independently of CycloneDX. We could do the exact same thing here. allowing us to iterate on this completely independently. But what we could do, because we're using external references here and a few other CycloneDX stuff, this particular schema would have a dependency on the CycloneDX schema, and just the opposite would happen as well. So we would end up with a circular dependency, but it would be possible. And I'm not necessarily sure it's a questionable design decision. I just don't think it's going to, in this particular case, I don't think it's going to shoot us in the foot if we do it.
And what helps, I'm still don't mentally have a good idea of what helps us with adoption. Does having a separate spec help us out because then it's more approachable by SPDX and others? Or is being more closely aligned with CycloneDX help adoption because it's on the coattails of a much bigger activity?
Right.
Yeah, I'm worried that
Like, I don't have an idea which one is actually better for adoption here.
And it might introduce confusion if we do both.
I'm worried if we come out with a format for machine readable security requirements, people are going to go, blah, who cares? Because they don't see how it fits into the bigger picture, and why it really is a kind of, it really, to me, it's part of the story of like, what does this software do and what components are in it? It's like, it's part of that story to me. So I think I'd err on the side of like including it in Cyclone, and if people want to try to use it standalone, great.
Okay. All right. So let's try that then. Like I said, we're feature complete for 1.5. I think we're going to need some feedback on this. So what we'll do is we'll target this for inclusion in 1.6. That will allow us to get some feedback. And in the process, once 1.5 is released, we will spin up a 1.6 branch, which obviously will be a fork of 1.5. This will be part of that. And you can start actually using that. Even though the spec won't be released yet, you'll actually be able to kick the tires and start using it.
Steve, do you know the folks at OMB that are running the attestation program there directly?
I don't know them, nor do I know their thought process on why they thought PDFs were a thing.
No, they may not have had a better option, right? And so like,
True.
I think actually it'd be worth talking to them at some point over the next weeks or months or whatever, as we get to 1.6. When is 1.6 scheduled, by the way? Is there a date?
We're going to try to do it this year. So historically, we've been releasing every single year, but in the case of 1.6, all the legwork is, for the most part, already complete.
Right.
IBM Research has already done their job.
Yeah.
And so we're making an announcement on 1.5 soon. And as part of that announcement, we're also announcing the immediate development of 1.6 and the formation of a working group to support that.
So, it would probably be worth trying to get a meeting with, and I don't know, maybe Tom Aldrich or one of those guys, maybe they can sort of connect us up with someone who's involved with that program. And we could, brief them on it and say, hey, look, this is going to be part of CycloneDX. It meets your use case. In fact, it was specifically designed for your use case.
Right.
And we'd love to work together with you to promote this as part of the launch of 1.6. And I know they just pushed the deadline out. It was, the OMB 2218 was whatever, and then they just pushed it out. So it may be like that the timelines kind of line up. I'd have to go check the dates specifically, but that would be kind of neat if we could go to market with a prepackaged SSDF attestation set of requirements and a template, and you just fill in some blanks and digitally sign it, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
You could even imagine.
I had a team who just did this activity for SSDF. And who hodgepodged their own way of doing this. So they're very receptive. I have a big team that just did this for our internal Kubernetes deployments.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to. I don't know if OWASP would stand up a website or something, but if there was a website where you could answer some questions and put in your PGP key or something and generate one of these things, I think that would be pretty cool.
The easy button.
Well, you want to bootstrap it, like get people doing it, that's the way to go.
Yep.
I mean,
Well, it's
honestly,
definitely going
just
to spark
having
the
the
creation of
standards in a,
tools.
yeah, just having the standards in a machine readable format by itself would be hugely beneficial. Having that with the Q links that actually cross links the standards, that'd be invaluable to a lot of commercial entities in general. Like back when I was working at Booz Allen, we were looking to try and do that type of work. And it was a very tough nut to crack. If we could have just pulled that in externally from somewhere, it would have been huge.
And is there a role for dependency track here?
Um,
It could attest to certain things in theory.
maybe,
I'm
yeah,
thinking of actually like helping companies manage their attestations as like sort of new functionality and dependency track.
maybe. You know, one of the things that we wanted to do, what NIST never, the NVD never stood up the endpoints, is to actually have a formal like release process in dependency track, where upon release of software, we could notify the NVD of, here's this new brand release, here's the SWID tag for it,
Oh,
and
right. So you'd solve the
peop-
naming problem.
exactly. But even though they have those endpoints, they've been beta for like years. They're not publicly available, and I don't know. Their SWID effort just seemed to disappear, so I'm not sure where that's at.
Well, if you don't give them any funding for half the year, then that's what happens.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna miss that call with the NVD next week too, Jeff. I'll be on vacation. I'll be thinking
Yeah,
of
good
you,
for you.
but
If there's anything you
yeah.
want me to bring up, shoot me a message and I'll try and
Okay.
raise it.
All right. Very good. So in terms of next steps, what I will do is, once 1.5 is released, I'm gonna mix this around a little bit, get the attestation stuff properly in a 1.6 branch, because right now it's on a 1.5 branch, but I'll get it properly done on a 1.6 branch. And then what we can maybe do, Jeff, is maybe, do you want to would you like us to create like we've got the bomb examples repo. We could potentially reuse that for maybe the attestations work, and just say it's kind of a work in progress from 1.6. We can put a bunch of examples in there. Maybe get some of the OWASP people to do some stuff there, ASVS and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
I feel like I ought to be able to use ChatGPT here and just say, hey, here's my spec. Can you import 853 and generate this standard for me? I actually think it would almost work.
it might work close enough.
I know.
So, but then that, yeah, well, yeah, 853. I mean, the official doc is a PDF. They have a spreadsheet version of that?
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can.
Most of the NIST
Yeah,
standards are spreadsheetable.
right. Yeah, and I know the OWASP stuff. They all have like JSON or whatever of their stuff as well. So that should be fairly easy.
Yeah, we should probably pick a list of initial targets that we want to hit. Like I think PCI, ASVS, some of the NIST stuff. I don't know, maybe OpenSAM. I'm not a big BSIM
Yeah,
guy for historical reasons, but
sure.
whatever. We should
We use
have,
both, so yeah.
yeah, we should have a handful of those, like, done and ready. I think that'll contribute a lot. And maybe I don't know, I don't do much outside of AppSec, but I guess there are standards outside of AppSec that you could model just about anything in this.
Pretty much. I mean, underwriter laboratories and all kinds of other things potentially.
I was thinking about some of like the hardening guidelines for platforms and stuff. Like there's tons of those that are pretty straightforward, checkbox kind of stuff.
Sure. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd
Maybe
be
even
really
the
interested.
aerospace industry has stuff. I have no idea.
Oh yeah, we do.
And some of those
I figured.
Yeah. I would be very interested in SSDF, so I'm happy to help collaborate on that one.
Yeah.
Like I said,
Okay.
we just went through that activity, and we were already talking internally about how we were going to adopt this as part of that. So
I have a spreadsheet I made
Cool.
internally for SSDF, so to map what contrast does. So I could send you that if I don't know if I have your email actually.
put it here in chat.
All right.
You can also find me on the CycloneDX Slack organization.
I'm not as slack as I would like to be. All right. I'll send you that. Just treat it as confidential because I don't know if we've released it yet or anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hey, it's been a pleasure working with you guys on this part of it, and I'm looking forward to like phase 2.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. Now, what should we do with the existing attestation working group calls that are currently scheduled? Should we keep them?
I would
we
keep them, and I don't know if we just use them for a different purpose. Like, let's talk about like,
examples or
go to market stuff and like,
okay.
but maybe we start to, recruit some other people to it, and it's not as technical, but it's more about
Sure.
adoption.
Okay, let's do that then. We'll keep it on the calendar and change its purpose a little bit. Well, very good, gentlemen.
Do we want to
What's
raise
that?
it on some of the other SBOM calls and invite folks, or?
Yes. What I'm going to do is make it kind of part of our messaging for 1.5, the release of 1.5, because we're also going to be messaging the existence of some other things. So yeah, we can also, as part of that release, maybe put it in there. But there's also going to be that blog post as
Yeah.
well on the OWASP.org site. So maybe we can stuff it in there as well. And then we can, we can do some social magic on the OWASP Slack channels and get some other leaders kind of behind it and start supporting it. So
Okay, sounds good.
awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Cheers.
Talk to you later.